The Folk of the Earth 2, The Wicked King by Holly Black. Book 1. Say to him thus, that I defy his slanders and his infamy, and as a mortal enemy do publicly proclaim him. Withal, that if I had mine own, he should not wear the fiery crown, but with a vengeance should come down, nor we a king should name him. Michael Drayton, Nymphedia. Prologue. Youth lifted the heavy practice sword, moving into the first stance. Readiness. Get used to the weight, Madoc had told her. You must be strong enough to strike and strike and strike again without tiring. The first lesson is to make yourself that strong. It will hurt. Pain makes you strong. She planted her feet in the grass. Wind ruffled her hair as she moved through the stances. 1. The sword before her, canted to one side, protecting her body. 2. The pommel hike, as though the blade were a horn coming from her head. 3. Down to her hip, then in a deceptively casual droop in front of her. Then 4. Up again, to her shoulder. Each position could move easily into a strike or a defense. Fighting was chess, anticipating the move of one's opponent and countering it before one got hit. But it was chess played with the whole body. Chess that left her bruised and tired and frustrated with the whole world and with herself too. Or maybe it was more like riding a bike. When she'd been learning to do that, back in the real world, she'd fallen lots of times. Her knees had been scabby enough that Mom thought she might have scars, but Youth had taken off her training wheels herself and disdained riding carefully on the sidewalk, as Tarin did. Youth wanted to ride in the street, fast, like Vivi, and if she got gravel embedded in her skin for it, well, then she'd let that pick it out with tweezers at night. Sometimes Youth longed for her bike, but there were none in Fiery. Instead, she had a giant toad and thin greenish ponies and wild-eyed horses slim as shadows. And she had weapons. And her parents' murderer, now her foster father, the High King's general, Madoc, who wanted to teach her how to ride too fast and how to fight to death. No matter how hard she swung at him, it just made him laugh. He liked her anger. Fire, he called it. She liked it when she was angry too. Angry was better than scared. Better than remembering she was a mortal among monsters. No one was offering her the option of training wheels anymore. On the other side of the field, Madoc was guiding Tarin through a series of stances. Tarin was learning the sword, too, although she had different problems than Youth. Her stances were more perfect, but she hated sparring. She paired the obvious defenses with the obvious attacks, so it was easy to lure her into a series of moves and then score a hit by breaking the pattern. Each time it happened, Tarin got mad, as though Youth were flouting the steps of a dance rather than winning. Come here, Madoc called to Youth across the silver expanse of grass. She walked to him, sword slung over her shoulders. The sun was just setting, but fairies are twilight creatures, and their day was not even half done. The sky was streaked with copper and gold. She nailed a deep breath of pine needles. For a moment, she felt as though she were just a kid learning a new sport. Come spar, he said when Youth got closer. Both of you girls against this old redcap. Tarin leaned against her sword, the tip of it sinking into the ground. She wasn't supposed to hold it that way. It wasn't good for the blade. But Madoc didn't reprimand her. Power, he said. Power is the ability to get what you want. Power is the ability to be the one making the decisions. And how do we get power? Youth stepped beside her twin. It was obvious that Madoc expected a response, but also that he expected the wrong one. We learn how to fight well, she said to say something. When Madoc smiled at her, she could see the points of his bottom cuspids, longer than the rest of his teeth. He tousled her hair, and she felt the sharp edges of his claw-like nails against her scalp, too light to hurt, but a reminder of what he was nonetheless. We get power by taking it. He pointed toward a low hill with a thorn tree growing on it. Let's make a game of the next lesson. That's my hill. Go ahead and take it. Tarin dutifully trooped toward it, Youth behind her. Madoc kept pace, his smile all teeth. Now what? Tarin asked, without any particular excitement. Madok looked into the distance, as though he was contemplating and discarding various rules. No, hold it against attack. Wait, what? You'd asked. From you? Is this a strategy game or a sparring practice? Tarin asked, frowning. Madok brought one finger under her chin, raising her head until she was looking into his golden cat eyes. What is sparring but a game of strategy played at speed? He told her with a great seriousness. Talk with your sister. When the sun reaches the trunk of that tree, I will come for my heel. Knock me down, but once, and you both win. Then he departed for a copse of trees some ways away. Tarin sat down on the grass. I don't want to do this, she said. It's just a game, Jude reminded her nervously. Tarin gave her a long look, the one that they gave each other when one of them was pretending things were normal. Okay, so what do you think we should do? Jude looked up into the branches of the thorn tree. What if one of us threw rocks while the other did the sparring? Okay, Tarin said, pushing herself up and beginning to gather stones in the folds of her skirts. You don't think he'll get mad, do you? Jude shook her head, but she understood Tarin's question. What if he killed them by accident? You've got to choose which hill to die on. Mom used to tell that. It had been one of those weird sayings adults expected her to understand, even though they made no sense. Like, one in the hand is worth two in the bus, or every stick has two ends, or the totally mysterious a cat may look at a king. Now, standing on an actual hill with a sword in her hand, she understood it a lot better. Get into position, Jude said, and Tarin wasted no time in climbing the thorn tree. Jude checked the sun mark, wondering what sort of tricks Madok might use. The longer he waited, the darker it would get, and while he could see in the dark, Jude and Tarin could not. But in the end, he didn't use any tricks. He came out of the woods and in their direction, howling as though he were leading an army of 100. Jude's knees went weak with terror. This is just a game, she reminded herself frantically. The closer he got, though, the less her body believed her. Every animal instinct strained to run. Their strategy seemed silly now in the face of his hugeness and their smallness, in the face of her fear. She thought of her mother bleeding on the ground, recalled the smell of her insides as they leaked out. The memory fell like thunder in her head. She was going to die. Run, her whole body urged. Run! No, her mother had run. Jude planted her feet. She made herself move into the first position, even though her legs felt wobbly. He had the advantage, even coming up that hill, because he had momentum on his side. The stones raining down on him from Tarin barely checked his pace. Jude spun out of the way, not even bothering to try to block the first blow. Putting the tree between them, she dodged his second and third. When the fourth one came, it knocked her to the grass. She closed her eyes against the killing strike. You can take a thing when no one's looking, but defending it, even with all the advantage on your side, is no easy task, Madok told her with a laugh. She looked up to find him offering her a hand. Power is much easier to acquire than it is to hold on to. Relief broke over her. It was just a game after all, just another lesson. That wasn't fair, Tarin complained. You didn't say anything. Nothing was fair in Fiery. She had learned to stop expecting it to be. Madok hauled Jude to her feet and threw a heavy arm over her shoulders. He drew her and her twin in for an embrace. He smelled like smoke and dried blood, and Jude let herself sag against him. It was good to be hugged, even by a monster. Chapter 1. The new High King of Fiery lunges on his throne, his crown resting at an insouciant angle, his long, biliously scarlet cloak pinned at his shoulders and sweeping the floor, and earring shines from the peak of one pointed ear. Heavy rings glitter along his knuckles. His most ostentatious decoration, however, is his soft, sullen mouth. It makes him look every bit the jerk that he is. I stand to one side of him, in the honored position of seneschal. I am supposed to be High King Cardan's most trusted advisor, and so I play that part rather than my real role, the hind behind the throne, with the power to compel him to obey should he try to cross me. Scanning the crowd, I look for a spy from the Court of Shadows. They intercepted a communication from the Tower Forgetting, where Kandra's brother is jailed, and are bringing it to me instead of to its intended recipient. And that's only the latest crisis. It's been 5 months since I forced Cardan onto the throne of Elham as my puppet king. 5 months since I betrayed my family. Since my sister carried my little brother to the mortal realm and away from the crown that he might have worn. Since I crossed swords with Madoc. 5 months since I've slept for more than a few hours at a stretch. It seemed like a good trait. A very fairy trait, even. Put someone who despised me on the throne so that Oak would be out of danger. It was thrilling to trick Cardan into promising to serve me for a year and a day, exhilarating when my plan came together. Then, a year and a day seemed like forever. But now I must figure out how to keep him in my power and out of trouble for longer than that. Long enough to give Oak a chance to have what I didn't, a childhood. Now, a year and a day seems like no time at all. And despite having put Cardan on the throne through my own machinations, despite scheming to keep him there, I cannot help being unnerved by how comfortable he looks. Fairy rulers are tied to the land. They are the lifeblood and the beating heart of the realm in some mystical way that I don't fully understand. But surely Cardan isn't that, not with his commitment to being a layabout who does none of the real work of governance. Mostly, his obligations appear to be allowing his ring-covered hands to be kissed and accepting the blandishments of the folk. I'm sure he enjoys that part of it, the kisses, the bowing and scraping. He's certainly enjoying the wine. He calls again and again for his cabochon-encrusted goblet to be refilled with a pale green liquor. The very smell of it makes my head spin. During a lull, he glances up at me, raising one black brow. Enjoying yourself? Not as much as you are, I tell him. No matter how much he disliked me when we were in school, that was a guttering candle to be the steady flame of his hatred now. His mouth curls into a smile. His eyes shine with wicked intent. Look at them all, your subjects. A shame not a one knows who their true ruler is. My face heats a little at his words. His gift is to take a compliment and turn it into an insult, a jab that hurts more for the temptation to take it at face value. I spent so many revels avoiding notice. Now everyone sees me, bathed in candlelight, in one of the 3 nearly identical black doublets I wear each evening. My sword knight fell at my hip. They twirl in their circle dances and play their songs. They drink their golden wine and compose their riddles and their curses while I look down on them from the royal days. They are beautiful and terrible, and they might despise my mortality, might mock it, but I am up here and they are not. Of course, perhaps that isn't so different from hiding. Perhaps it is just hiding in plain sight, but I cannot deny that the power I hold gives me a kick, a jolt of pleasure whenever I think on it. I just wish Cardan couldn't tell. If I look carefully, I can spot my twin sister, Tarin, dancing with Locke, her betrothed. Locke, who I once thought might love me. Locke, whom I once thought I could love. It's Tarin I miss, though. Nights like tonight, I imagine hopping down from the days and going to her, trying to explain my choices. Her marriage is only 3 weeks away, and still we haven't spoken. I keep telling myself I need her to come to me first. She played me for a fool with Locke. I still feel stupid when I look at them. If she won't apologize, then at least she should be the one to pretend there's nothing to apologize for. I might accept that, even, but I will not be the one to go to Tarin, to beg. My eyes follow her as she dances. I don't bother to look for Madoc. His love is part of the price I paid for this position. A short, wizened fiery with a cloud of silver hair and a coat of scarlet kneels below the days, waiting to be recognized. His cuffs are jeweled, and the moth pin that holds his cloak in place has wings that move on their own. Despite his posture of servants, his gaze is greedy. Beside him stand 2 pale hill folk with long limbs and hair that blows behind them, though there is no breeze. Drunk or sober, now that Cardan is the High King, he must listen to those subjects who would have him rule on a problem, no matter how small, or grant a boon. I cannot imagine why anyone would put their fate in his hands, but Fire is full of caprice. Luckily, I'm there to whisper my counsel in his ear, as any seneschal might. The difference is that he must listen to me, and if he whispers back a few horrific insults, well, at least he's forced to whisper. Of course, then the question becomes whether I deserve to have all this power. I won't be horrible for the sake of my own amusement, I tell myself. That's got to be worth something. Ah, Cardan says, leaning forward on the throne, causing his crown to tip lower on his brow. He takes a deep swallow of the wine and smiles down at the trio. This must be a grave concern, to bring it before the High King. You may already have heard tales of me, says the small fairy. I made the crown that sits upon your head. I am called Grimsen the Smith, long in exile with the Alder King. His bones are now at rest, but there is a new Alder King in Fairfold, as there is a new High King here. Severin, I say. The smith looks at me, obviously surprised that I have spoken. Then his gaze returns to the High King. I beg you to allow me to return to the High Court. Cardan blinks a few times, as though trying to focus on the petitioner in front of him. So, you were yourself exiled, or you chose to leave? I recall Cardan's telling me a little about Severin, but he hadn't mentioned Grimson. I've heard of him, of course. He's the blacksmith who made the blood crown for Map and wove enchantments into it. It's said he can make anything from metal, even living things. Metal birds that fly, metal snakes that slither and strike. He made the twin swords, Heartseeker and Heartsworn, one that never misses and the other that can cut through anything. Unfortunately, he made them for the Elder King. I was sworn to him as his servant, says Grimson. When he went into exile, I was forced to follow, and in so doing, fell into disfavor myself. Although I made only trinkets for him in Fairfold, I was still considered to be his creature by your father. Now, with both of them dead, I crave permission to carve out a place for myself here at your court. Punish me no further, and my loyalty to you will be as great as your wisdom. I look at the little smith more closely, suddenly sure he's playing with words. But to what end? The request seems genuine, and if Grimson's humility is not, well, his fame makes that no surprise. Very well, Cardan says, looking pleased to be asked for something easy to give. Your exile is over. Give me your oath, and the High Court will welcome you. Grimson bows low, his expression theatrically troubled. Noble king, you ask for the smallest and most reasonable thing from your servant, but I, who have suffered for such vows, am loath to make them again. Allow me this. Grant that I may show you my loyalty in my deeds, rather than binding myself with my words. I put my hand on Cardan's arm, but he shrugs off my cautioning squeeze. I could say something, and he would be forced, by prior command, to at least not contradict me, but I don't know what to say. Having the smith here, forging for Elfham, is no small thing. It is worth, perhaps, the lack of an oath. And yet, something in Grimson's gaze looks like a little too self-satisfied, a little too sure of himself. I suspect a trick. Cardan speaks before I can puzzle anything more out. I accept your condition. Indeed, I will give you a boon. An old building with a forge sits on the edge of the palace grounds. You shall have it for your own, and as much metal as you require. I look forward to seeing what you will make for us. Grimson bows low. Your kindness shall not be forgotten. I mislike this, but perhaps I'm being overcautious. Perhaps it's only that I don't like the smith himself. There's little time to consider it before another petitioner steps forward. A hag, old and powerful enough that the air around her seems to crackle with the force of her magic. Her fingers are twiggy, her hair the color of smoke, and her nose like the blade of a scythe. Around her throat she wears a necklace of rocks, its bed carved with whorls that seem to catch and puzzle the eye. When she moves, the heavy robes around her ripple, and I spy clawed feet like those of a bird of prey. Kingling, the hag says, Mother Marrow brings you gifts. Your fealty is all I require. Cardan's voice is light. For now. Oh, I'm sworn to the crown. Sure enough, she says, reaching into one of her pockets and drawing out a cloth that looks blacker than the night sky, so black that it seems to drink the light around it. The fabric slithers over her hand. But I have come all this way to present you with a rare prize. The folk do not like debt, which is why they will not repay a favor with mere thanks. Give them an oatcake, and they will fill one of the rooms of your house with grain, overpaying to push debt back onto you. And yet, tribute is given to high kings all the time. Gold, service, swords with names, but we don't usually call those things gifts, nor prizes. I don't know what to make of her little speech. Her voice is poor. My daughter and I wove this of spilder silk and nightmares. A garment cut from it can turn a sharp blade, yet be as soft as a shadow against your skin. Cardan frowns, but his gaze is drawn again and again to the marvelous cloth. I admit, I don't think I've seen its equal. Then, you accept what I would bestow upon you? She asks, a slight gleam in her eye. I am older than your father and your mother, older than the stones of this palace, as old as the bones of the earth. Though you are the High King, Mother Marrow will have your word. Cardan's eyes narrow. She's annoyed him. I can see that. There's a trick here, and this time I know what it is. Before he can, I start speaking. You said gifts, but you have only shown us your marvelous cloth. I am sure the crown would be pleased to have it, were it freely given. Her gaze comes to rest on me, her eyes hard and cold as night itself. And who are you to speak for the High King? I am his seneschal, Mother Marrow. And will you let this mortal girl answer for you? She asks Cardan. He gives me a look of such condescension that it makes my cheeks hit. The look lingers. His mouth twists, carving. I suppose I shall, he says finally. It amuses her to keep me out of trouble. I bite my tongue as he turns a placid expression on Mother Marrow. She's clever enough, the hag says, spitting out the words like a curse. Very well. The cloth is yours, your majesty. I give it freely. I give you only that and nothing more. Cardan leans forward as though they are sharing a jest. Oh, tell me the rest. I like tricks and snares, even ones I was nearly caught in. Mother Marrow shifts from one clothed foot to the other. The first sign of nerves is displayed. Even for a hag with bones as old as he claimed, a High King's wrath is dangerous. Very well, and had you accepted all I would bestow upon you, you would have found yourself under a geese, allowing you to marry only a weaver of the cloth in my hands, myself or my daughter. A cold shudder goes through me at the thought of what might have happened then. Could the High King of Fairy have been compelled into such a marriage? Surely there would have been a way around it. I thought of the last High King, who never wed. Marriage is unusual among the rulers of Fairy, because once a ruler, one remains a ruler until death or abdication. Among commoners and the gentry, Fairy marriages are arranged to be gotten out of, unlike the mortal, until death do us part. They contain conditions like until you shall both renounce each other, or unless one strikes the other in anger, or the cleverly worded for the duration of a life, without specifying whose. But a uniting of kings and or queens can never be dissolved. Should Cardan marry, I wouldn't just have to get him off the throne to get oak on it, I'd have to remove his bride as well. Cardan's eyebrows rise, but he has all the appearance of blissful unconcern. My lady, you flatter me. I had no idea you were interested. Her gaze is unflinching as she passes her gift to one of Cardan's personal guard. May you grow into the wisdom of your counselors. The fervent prayer of many, he says. Tell me, has your daughter made the journey with you? She's here, the hag says. A girl steps from the crowd to bow low before Cardan. She's young, with a mass of unbound hair. Like her mother, her limbs are oddly long and twig-like. But where her mother is unsettling bony, she has a kind of grace. Maybe it helps that her feet resemble human ones. Although, to be fair, they are turned backward. I would make a poor husband, Cardan says, turning his attention to the girl, who appears to shrink down into herself at the force of his regard. But grant me a dance, and I will show you my other talents. I give him a suspicious look. Come, Mother Marrow says to the girl, and grabs her not particularly gently by the arm, dragging her into the crowd. Then she looks back at Cardan. We three will meet again. They're all going to marry you, you know, Locke drawls. I know his voice even before I look to find that he has taken the position that Mother Marrow vacated. He grins up at Cardan, looking delighted with himself and the world. Better to take consorts, Locke says. Lots and lots of consorts. Spoken like a man about to enter wedlock, Cardan reminds him. Oh, leave off. Like Mother Marrow, I have brought you a gift. Locke takes a step toward the dais. One with fewer barbs. He doesn't look in my direction. It's as though he doesn't see me or that I am as uninteresting as a piece of furniture. I wish it didn't bother me. I wish I didn't remember standing at the very top of the highest tower on his estate, his body warm against mine. I wish he hadn't used me to test my sister's love for him. I wish she hadn't let him. If wishes were horses, my mortal father used to say, beggars would ride. Another one of those phrases that make no sense until it does. Oh, Cardan looks more puzzled than intrigued. I wish to give you me, as your master of rebels, Locke announces. Grant me the position, and I will make it my duty and pleasure to keep the High King of Elfham from being bored. There are so many jobs in a palace, servants and ministers, ambassadors and generals, advisors and tailors, jesters and makers of riddles, grooms for horses and keepers of spiders, and a dozen other positions I've forgotten. I didn't even know there was a master of revels. Maybe there wasn't until now. I will serve up delights you've never imagined. Locke's smile is infectious. He will serve up trouble, that's for sure. Trouble I have no time for. Have a care, I say, drawing Locke's attention to me for the first time. I am sure you would not wish to insult the High King's imagination. Indeed, I'm sure not, Cardan says in a way that's difficult to interpret. Locke's smile doesn't waver. Instead, he hops onto the dais, causing the knights on either side to move immediately to stop him. Cardan waves them away. If you make him master of rebels, I begin quickly, desperately. Are you commanding me? Cardan interrupts, eyebrow arched. He knows I can't say yes, not with the possibility of Locke's overhearing. Of course not, I grinned out. Good, Cardan says, turning his gaze from me. I'm of a mind to grant your request, Locke. Things have been so very dull of late. I see Locke smirk and bite the inside of my cheek to keep back the words of command. It would have been so satisfying to see his expression, to flaunt my power in front of him. Satisfying, but stupid. Before, grackles and larks and falcons bite for the heart of the court, Locke says, referring to the factions that preferred revelry, artistry, or war. Factions that fell in and out of favor with Eldred. But now, the court heart is yours and yours alone. Let's break it. Cardan looks at Locke oddly, as though considering, seemingly for the first time, that being High King might be fun, as though he's imagining what it would be like to rule without straining against my lease. Then, on the other side of the dais, I finally spot the bomb, a spy in the court of shadows. Her white hair a halo around her brown face. She signals to me. I don't like Locke and Cardan together, don't like their idea of entertainment, but I try to put that aside as I leave the dais and make my way to her. After all, there is no way to scheme against Locke when he is drawn to whatever amuses him most in the moment. Halfway to where the bomb's standing, I hear Locke's voice ring out over the crowd. We will celebrate the Hunter's Moon in the Milkwood, and there the High King will give you a debauch such that bards will sing of. This I promise you. Dread coils in my belly. Locke is pulling a few pixies from the crowd up onto the dais, their iridescent wings shining in the candlelight. A girl laughs uproariously and reaches for Cardan's goblet, drinking it to the dregs. I expect him to lash out, to humiliate her or shred her wings, but he only smiles and calls for more wine. Whatever Locke has in store, Cardan seems all too ready to play along. All fiery coronations are followed by a month of revelry, feasting, buzzing, riding, dueling, and more. The folk are expected to dance through the soles of their shoes from sundown to sunup, But 5 months after Cardan's becoming hiking, the Great Hall remains always full, the drinking horns overflowing with mead and clover wine. The revelry has barely slowed. It has been a long time since Elfham had such young hiking, and a wild, reckless air infects the courtiers. The hunter's moon is soon, sooner even than Tarin's wedding. If Locke intends to stoke the flames of revelry higher and higher still, how long before that becomes a danger? With some difficulty, I turn my back on Cardan. After all, what would be the purpose in catching his eye? His hatred is such that he will do what he can, inside of my commands, to defy me. And he's very good at defiance. I would like to say that he always hated me, but for a brief, strange time, it felt as though we understood each other, maybe even liked each other. Altogether an unlikely alliance began with my blade to his throat. It resulted in his trusting me enough to put himself in my power, a trust that I betrayed. Once he tormented me because he was young and bored and angry and cruel. Now he has better reasons for the torments he will inflict on me after a year and a day is gone. It will be very hard to keep him always under my thumb. I reach the bomb and she shoves a piece of paper into my hand. Another note for Cardan from Balekin, she says. This one made it all the way to the palace before we intercept it. Is it the same as the first two? She nods. Much like, Balekin tries to flatter our hiking into coming to his prison cell. He wants to propose some kind of bargain. I'm sure he does, I say, glad once again to have been brought into the court of shadows and to have them still watching my back. What will you do? She asks me. I'll go see Prince Balekin. If he wants to make the High King an offer, he'll have to convince the High King Seneschal first. A corner of her mouth lifts. I'll come with you. I glance back at the throne again, making a back gesture. No, stay here. Try to keep Cardan from getting into trouble. He is trouble, she reminds me, but doesn't seem particularly worried by her own worrying pronouncement. As I head toward the passageways into the palace, I spot Maddock across the room, half in shadow, watching me with his cat eyes. He isn't close enough to speak, but if he were, I have no doubt what he would say. Power is much easier to acquire than it is to hold on to.